Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 134 based on novel. So let's start. Boom. The fierce thunder was like bursts of animal roar, which spread endlessly between the heaven and earth. On the far side of the sky, a dark cloud gradually spread. Although it was far away, Xiao Yan could still feel the terrible momentum from it. As Xiao Yan took off, several streamers flickered in other directions in Shaolin City. In the twinkling of an eye, they had stepped into the void like Xiao Yang. Seeing these people, Xiao Yang couldn't help narrowing his eyes, and his eyes quickly flashed a light. These people were just several strong fighters in Shaolin City. He paused and stared at the direction of the thunder. At the same time, in the eyes of those people, all kinds of expressions were mixed. Several people looked at each other. Finally, when they looked at Xiao Yang, they looked at him slightly, and immediately passed him at will. A pair of eyes full of solemn colors stared at the distant edge of the sky. Especially when they looked at the thunder cloud, Rao couldn't help grinning with the heart of these strong fighters. For the thunder cloud, even if it was as strong as Fighting Emperor, it also seems to feel a sense of fear. With a slight frown, Xiao Yang slowly took back his eyes, and then looked at the thick thunder clouds on the edge of the sky. Boom! The thunder roared and marveled at the distance, but the thunder seemed to echo in your ears, making you feel a chill rising in your heart. This is Dan Lei. How can it be so terrible? Is this a fourth-order Dan Lei, or even a fifth-order Dan Lei? Xiao Yang's lips and teeth trembled slightly. The low voice in his mouth contained a sense of shock. Such a terrible thunder cloud could really be called the first time to see you. He had no doubt that if the thunder cloud broke out completely, he might not be able to stop a blow. Therefore, Xiao Yang was not sure about this terrible thunder cloud. No, this is not Dan Lei. At this time, the bone quiet in Xiao Yang's body for a long time finally made a sound slowly. His words were also full of solemn meaning. It was obvious that Rao was afraid to underestimate the strange thunder clouds that only appeared on the far edge of the sky. It seemed that Xiao Yang was aware of the emotional fluctuation in Guyo's words. Xiao Yang was a little stunned. He immediately frowned and looked at the thunder cloud. At the same time, he also asked Guyo in his heart. Jiu Lao, what is this thunder cloud, and how can the power contained in it be so powerful? Yes, it's strange if this thing doesn't make you feel dangerous. Jiu Yu's mood quickly returned to tranquility, but there was a sense of banter in his tone, and he smiled softly at Xiao Yang. Bones always know that thing. Hey, I don't just know. I've experienced it myself, but don't worry. You'll have a chance to feel it yourself in the future. With a slight sigh, Guyo seemed to think of something in the past, and his heart could not help shivering. Bone old, just say it. What exactly is this thunder cloud? What do you mean by what you just said? The just relaxed eyebrow frowned again. Xiao Yang had more doubts about Guyo's vague answer. He glanced lightly, so he couldn't help but follow up and continue to ask Guyo. Hey, this is thunder robbery. With a slight smile, Jiu began to speak slowly, and at the moment when the words were spit out in his mouth, Xiao Yang's face suddenly solidified. At the same time, his eyes stared at the black thunder cloud beyond the distant sky, and his heart turned upside down for a while, and the meaning of horror was more difficult to express. Thunder robbery, just these two words, Xiao Yang already understood why the thunder cloud started and what it was used for. However, when the semi-emperor strong person is about to break through the fighting emperor, it will lead to thunder robbery. That kind of thunder robbery has been strong enough to blow a fighting emperor strong person to the point of serious injury, and even enough to blow a fighting emperor strong person who is making a breakthrough to death. This can explain why on this continent, although there are many semi-imperialist powers, there are few people who can really break through to fight the imperialist powers. Although some semi-imperialist strong people are not weak in cultivation talent, and even can reach the level of fighting emperor by relying on their own cultivation, there are often some people, even if the talent is terrible, they will eventually be stopped by this thunder robbery. Emperor robbery has almost become a shackle that prevents most semi-emperor strong people from becoming fighting emperor strong people. In front of emperor robbery, no matter how terrible your cultivation talent is, as long as you can't carry it, you can't reach the real fighting emperor level after all. It is for this reason that some of the 9-star-and-a-half emperors have reached the boundary of breaking through the level of fighting emperor, but they are reluctant to break through. The so-called reason is precisely because of this thunder robbery. Under the thunder robbery, Cheng will become a carefree man and become a real emperor fighting strong man. He will be respected by others. On the contrary, he will end up in an irreparable end. Under the thunder robbery, there will be no bones. Looking at the thunder cloud at the moment, it is obvious that someone is ready to break through the level of fighting Emperor. Old Bone, although the imperial robbery is powerful, can't you find a strong person to guard the robbery like resisting thunder? It seems that he thought of something. Xiao Yan frowned slightly and opened his mouth again to the bone-yu in his body. His tone was full of doubt. Smelly boy, you can't help taking the imperial robbery too easy. If the imperial robbery is really so good, won't everyone on the continent become a strong fighter against the emperor? Hearing Xiao Yang's words, Jiyu couldn't help laughing and scolding. Jiyu really felt ridiculous about Xiao Yang's simple idea. But then, Jiyu resumed his solemn look and paused slightly. Then he explained to Xiao Yang. Unless you can carry the imperial robbery by force with your own strength, any foreign object is useless in front of it. Of course, except the imperial robbery pill, I don't have to say much about the reason. You should understand it yourself. As a pill, Emperor Robbery Pill is only a way to improve the strength of the breakthrough. Although the time is short, it can also help the strong fighting emperor to resist thunder robbery, which is completely different from ordinary foreign objects. Although they also rely on foreign objects, the way to swallow pills makes them strong. They are powerful from the inside out, rather than relying entirely on the power of foreign objects like the former. On the 9th day, several strong fighters stood in the void, and their eyes were projected to the distant horizon. There, a thick black thunder cloud was rolling and gathering. Occasionally, even though they were far away, the thunder was also clearly transmitted to the ears of Xiao Yang and others. Hearing the terrible power contained in the thunder, Rao was determined by Xiao Yang, but he couldn't help shaking in his heart. The emperor robbery was really so terrible. If it was worthy of being the tomb of the semi-emperor strong, I'm afraid no semi-emperor strong would be able to take it down. Even Xiao Yang couldn't do this. Above the sky, the other strong fighting emperors also stared at the black thunder cloud with surprised faces. The shock in their hearts was not much worse than Xiao Yang. Even if they had already crossed this barrier, they would still feel a palpitation when they saw the imperial robbery again. They who have experienced the horror of the imperial robbery are naturally very clear. When breaking through the fight against the emperor, any mental instability and weak will may lead to the failure of the final robbery. Under the imperial robbery, there will be no other dependence unless they rely on their own willpower and fighting spirit. In the face of the emperor's robbery, we can only rely on ourselves. Boom! Suddenly, at the edge of the sky, the black-painted thunder cloud began to churn violently, just like a crazy warcraft. The thundering thunder kept ringing through the sky. Everyone felt a sharp stabbing pain in the eardrum, and Shaolin City below immediately became chaotic. A bright thunder burst from it, and the thunder like a dragon suddenly fell from the thunder cloud. The power of terror tore up the void along the way in an instant, and the whole heaven and earth suddenly changed color. And this is just the prelude to the storm. Lightning and thunder. From beginning to end, the imperial robbery has not really landed. Boom! Until a certain moment, the rolling thunder clouds suddenly rolled like boiling water. At the same time, the momentum on them became more frightening at this moment. Silver thunders constantly burst out from the thunder cloud. Immediately, in the middle of the dark thunder cloud, a crack gradually opened. Above the void, Xiao Yang and others clearly saw that a terrible thunder connecting heaven and earth burst out from the thunder cloud. At this moment, heaven and earth trembled, and everyone in heaven and earth was frightened. Compared with the previous thunder, this one can only be described by the 4 words shocking. The huge thunder is 100 feet thick, and the silver-white thunder is like a thunder dragon. At the moment it falls, the whole world seems to become dim. The breath of terror spread among the heaven and earth. Everyone stared at the scene above the sky in horror. Even some people with poor strength had turned pale under the shocking thunder. What's more, the gods and souls were afraid, and the chi and blood in their bodies surged, resulting in serious injuries. Boom! Then, at the moment when the thunder fell, an earth-shaking bang came suddenly. Between heaven and earth, people raised their eyes and looked. The thunder falling with the smell of destruction the moment before was forcibly blocked in the air by another equally powerful force. What a powerful force! At this moment, everyone's eyes in heaven and earth changed together. Everyone's eyes were filled with a very frightening look. No one could think that the world-shaking thunder would be forcibly stopped by another force. For this, Xiao Yang, as a spectator at the moment, is very clear in his heart. If he wants to resist the imperial robbery, he can only rely on the strength of the robber himself. No other outsider can help. Therefore, The person who stops the imperial robbery at the moment must be the one who is breaking through. Sure enough, when the people in heaven and earth stared, although they couldn't see clearly, they still vaguely saw a figure. The figure was wrapped up all over by Sen's white fighting spirit. Even within hundreds of feet around him, a fighting spirit barrier had been formed. At this moment, in front of him, there was a huge Lingtian palm. It was the terrorist force released from the palm that blocked the imperial robbery. Boom! The roar of the earth came again. Between heaven and earth, people only saw the terrible imperial robbery. Unexpectedly, they were forcibly blasted back by the figure, and this was not over. The figure showed no weakness. Sen's white fighting spirit spread freely. The figure moved and fought with the imperial robbery again in an instant. Boom, boom. Suddenly, the continuous roar shook the heaven and earth, and a wave of magnificent fighting spirit ripples swept across the sky. Even though they were far away, Xiao Yan and others could not help feeling a deep chill in their hearts. They just didn't know whether the chill came from the earth-shaking imperial robbery or the mysterious figure with dark white fighting spirit. At the same time, in the other 3 places, 3 pairs of colorful eyes have been staring at the changes between heaven and earth. Among the 3 eyes, they are either surprised, or even with a hint of sneer. It seems that it doesn't matter whether this figure can break through the fight against the emperor. At the edge of the sky, the battle between the human shadow and the imperial robbery is becoming more and more intense. At the moment, Xiao Yang, with dark eyes staring at the imperial robbery in the sky, can't help but frown and wonder in his heart. It seems that the imperial robbery is not as troublesome as Guyo said. Cut, what do you know, smelly boy? This is just the first imperial robbery. If you want to really survive the imperial robbery, you need to support 6 ways, and the power of these 6 imperial robberies is stronger than one. It seemed that he had guessed Xiao Yang's mind, and Guyo made a light mockery, but Xiao Yang didn't have to refute it. Then, another roar came. The emperor robbery was forcibly defeated by the figure on the 9th day. Ha ha. Emperor robbery, this is emperor robbery? It seems that it's just so. All half-emperors regard you as a grave, but in my eyes, you're not even a piece of lurse. On the distant void, the figure with a dark white fighting spirit stood proudly in the void. A sneer of disdain appeared on the face covered by the fighting spirit. The imperial robbery was really vulnerable to him. At least, in the collision just now, the imperial robbery was pressed and beaten by him all the time. Of course, when he said this arrogantly, he forgot that if it weren't for the finished imperial robbery pill he swallowed, I'm afraid he wouldn't be able to fight the imperial robbery. When the arrogant words in the shadow's mouth were spit out, it seemed that it completely angered the thunder cloud. Suddenly, the dark thunder cloud suddenly churned violently, but in a short period of time, a breath more terrible than before spread from the thunder cloud. At this moment, the face of the figure wrapped in fighting spirit finally solidified. The amazing imperial robbery lasted for a day, and in the end, the mysterious man finally dragged his seriously injured body to carry the imperial robbery. It was not until this moment that Xiao Yang and others gradually regained their consciousness. Only then did they understand how terrible the imperial robbery was. In front of it, even those who were as strong as fighting the emperor were also in danger of death. A face bitterly returned to his mind. Xiao Yang's face was full of lingering fear. He silently took back his previous words in his heart. Guyo said it well. The imperial robbery is indeed much more terrible than he imagined. He underestimated the imperial robbery. Who? The breath trembled slightly and slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Xiao Yang came down and fell into the city. He looked at the people in a trance in the city. Xiao Yang showed a trace of shock in the depths of his eyes. This imperial robbery is too terrible. The man just now almost died under the imperial robbery. If it was me, I'm afraid. Recalling the scenes just now, Xiao Yang couldn't help showing a trace of cold sweat on his forehead. He took a deep breath and calmed down. Xiao Yang raised his steps and continued to walk slowly towards the city. Cut, I haven't really let you go. What are you afraid of? Although the imperial robbery is strong, you're just a 6-star and half emperor now. Who can abuse the 9-star and half emperor? When you get to that level in the future, you won't be easier than that guy to get through the imperial robbery. Don't worry, with your means, it's your turn to break through. It's much easier. Aware of the worry in Xiao Yang's heart, Jiu Yuku half revealed a joke. Hearing this, Xiao Yang nodded slightly and felt a little certain. Yes, Guyo's right. Now he's just a little 6-star and a half emperor, but with his combat power far exceeding that of the strong at the same level, I believe that when he breaks through the strong at the same time, with the emperor robbery pill, the blood of Dudi and the blood of Long Huang, the three add up. Why do you worry that you can't get through the imperial robbery? With this in mind, Xiao Yan felt relaxed. When his mind was relieved, the whole person immediately felt relaxed. With a smile, Xiao Yan raised his eyes, and the soul power spread out. He quickly found several shops in Shilin City. With a smile, Tianjuabu suddenly showed up when his steps changed, and the shadow covered in black robes immediately turned into a current wind. Before the passers-by around him noticed, he had disappeared at the end of the street. The moon hung high above the dark night sky, and the bright stars covered the night sky like silver sand. In a deep mountain outside Shilin City, Xiao Yang sat on the top of the peak. Between the surrounding heaven and earth, a stream of heaven and earth energy gathered against Xiao Yang. It was not until half an hour later that Xiao Yang, who sat with his eyes closed, slowly withdrew from his cultivation state. He shook his head helplessly, and Xiao Yang sighed in his nose. Because he had just broken through to the middle of the 6-star-and-half Emperor, Xiao Yang could not gather more fighting spirit no matter how he practiced. Alas, it seems that it will take some time to run in. Otherwise, it will be difficult to improve your strength. With a sigh in his mouth, Xiao Yang couldn't help but breathe a sigh. After what happened during the day, Xiao Yang went through all the shops in Shilin City, but unfortunately, Xiao Yang didn't find anything he needed. This made Xiao Yang feel helpless and had to turn his eyes to cultivation. However, it is a pity that Xiao Yang's strength cannot be further improved in a short time because he has just broken through to the middle of the 6-star-and-half Emperor. Now there is still 1 month before the opening of the ancient ruins. In the remaining month, Xiao Yang is a little confused. Alas! Helpless, Xiao Yang flicked his mouth, and the red medicine tripod immediately fell heavily in front of Xiao Yang. It was the beast tripod. Since you can't do anything at present, you might as well just practice Dan medicine, which can be regarded as improving your second-class herbalist's medicine refining skill. After taking out the medicine tripod, Xiao Yang bent his fingers and flicked, and his gorgeous desire suddenly rose with a puff in the medicine tripod. Then, Xiao Yang wanted to take out some medicinal materials and prepare to refine pills, but then he frowned slightly and hesitated for a moment. With Xiao Yang's soul power, refining ordinary second-order pills is no longer a problem. In the process of refining pills, Xiao Yang can even use 1 heart and 2 purposes. Second-order pills are no longer difficult for today's Xiao Yang. Under his powerful soul power, unless it is a third-order pill, almost any second-order pill is easy for Xiao Yang, which has no effect on Xiao Yang who is eager to practice medicine cultivation. For a moment, Xiao Yang's eyes suddenly brightened, a smile was raised at the corners of his mouth, and his heart was moved. The soul power immediately separated from each other, and 9 figures were quickly condensed around Xiao Yang's body. These 9 figures are the 9 incarnations condensed by Xiao Yang's 9-turn incarnation. It's better to use 1 heart for 10 purposes than 1 heart for 2 purposes. In this way, it can not only help Xiao Yang increase his medicine refining skills, but also control these 9 incarnations for cultivation. In this way, it can really be called 1 arrow and 10 eagles. After finishing these, Xiao Yang suddenly waved his big sleeve. Suddenly, streamers flew out of the ring on Xiao Yang's hand and suspended on the void in front of Xiao Yang. Xiao Yang slowly closed his eyes, divided his mind into 10 thoughts, and tried his best to control his soul power. Hey, boy, aren't you afraid to eat too much at one time and do 10 things at the same time with the soul power of a second-class herbalist? Boy, you're really the first person I've seen. At this moment, even the Bonyu in Xiao Yang couldn't help laughing and scolding. Even he didn't have any hope for Xiao Yang's crazy move. However, looking for possibility in the impossible is Xiao Yang's temperament. Any despair will eventually be found a glimmer of hope in front of Xiao Yang. Although this kind of thing is almost impossible, miracles always happen at the last moment. Before the last moment, no one can deny the ending. Although miracles are illusory, many times they have to be believed. Moreover, the guy in front of us never seems to lack that kind of thing. With a slight dull noise, Xiao Yang, who was sweating all over his face before the huge red medicine tripod, couldn't help looking more pale. Seeing the medicinal materials in the medicine tripod burned to ashes again, he could not help feeling a burst of heartache because of Xiao Yang's nature. However, in a short period of 5 days, there were 7 sets of medicinal materials that were melted into ashes from the medicine tripod in front of Xiao Yang. All of these medicinal materials were used to refine the second-order advanced Dan medicine. If these medicinal materials were put on the market, each pair could at least exchange tens of millions of spirit coins, but like this, 7 sets were burned in Xiao Yang's hands, according to the words of ordinary people. Where is Xiao Yang refining pills? He is burning money at all. Such a lavish consumption of high-quality medicinal materials, even among the four families, dare not do like this. Tut tut. It's a pity that such a good medicine should be lost. It's a waste, a waste. In the void on one side, Jiuyu's body slowly appeared, and an old face showed an expression like a pity, with a slightly regretful meaning. At the same time, Xiao Yan quickly took back his mind and ignored the Bonu on one side. His heart read a move, and the gorgeous fire rose again in the beast tripod in front of him. With the previous 7 failures, Xiao Yang was undoubtedly more cautious than before. After the strange fire rose, Xiao Yang didn't rush to throw the herbs into the medicine tripod, but carefully felt the change of temperature in the medicine tripod. Until a long time later, when the temperature in the medicine tripod reached a critical point, Xiao Yang thought, a fire-red flower suspended directly above the medicine tripod was thrown into the medicine tripod by Xiao Yang with a whoosh. At the moment when the medicinal material entered the beast tripod, the gorgeous fire suddenly rushed at the medicinal material. The terrible high temperature, even with the medicine tripod as a barrier, still made people feel a burst of dryness and heat. The ferocious fire in the medicine tripod was like a wild lion. It quickly wrapped the medicinal material with open teeth and claws, and the terrible high temperature gnawed at the surface of the medicinal material. However, in a short time, a trace of red juice like blood was extracted from the medicinal material. However, in half an hour, the medicinal materials such as the medicine tripod were only left with a red juice about the size of the palm, which was dripping and spinning in the medicine tripod under the package of different fire. At the same time, in the juice, an extremely powerful violent drug also seemed to live at this moment, emitting a magnificent energy, pounding the 4 walls of the medicine tripod, sending out a loud bell sound like a bell, shocking people's soul. In this regard, Xiao Yang looked the same and carefully controlled the strange fire in the medicine tripod. At the same time, the 9 incarnations beside him also entered a crazy state of cultivation. Between heaven and earth, the brilliant fire light shines on the 4 sides. 9 huge whirlpools of fighting spirit stand between heaven and earth. It can be called a terrible suction. They inject a huge fighting spirit into the 9 human shadows below. With the continuous refining of the medicinal materials in the beast tripod in front of Xiao Yang, the breath in the 9 Taoist body around Xiao Yang gradually becomes strong. Now, among the 9 incarnations, except that the strength of 1 incarnation has reached the early stage of 5-star-and-half Emperor, the strength of the other 8 incarnations is only 4-star-and-half Emperor, and what's more, only the strength of 1-star-and-half Emperor. Even if the 9 incarnations are combined into one, the strength is only up to the late stage of 5-star-and-half Emperor. I want to help Xiao Yang, it's really very difficult. Moreover, the enemy Xiao Yang is facing is becoming stronger and stronger, and even has reached the level of fighting Emperor. In the face of enemies of that level, it is impossible to use avatar self-explosion to deal with them. As for those below fighting Emperor, it is hard to hurt Xiao Yang. Now, if Xiao Yang wants to use these 9 avatars, then we must raise their strength. Of course, compared with ordinary cultivation, the way to improve the strength of the avatar is much simpler. Because Xiao Yang's Numenon strength has reached the 6-star-and-half Emperor, there will be no barrier for the 9 avatars to break through before that. That is to say, as long as the 9 avatars can have enough morale support, it is not difficult to break through to the 6-star-and-half Emperor in a short time. However, the powerful energy needed during this period is nowhere to be found. According to the ordinary cultivation method and with the cultivation speed of the 9 incarnations, it will take him at least 10 years to reach the level of 6-stars-and-half Emperors, and this is still on the premise that they break through no barrier. Hoo. With such crazy cultivation and the crazy refining of different fires in the medicine tripod, 10 days later, a faint fragrance still flew out of the medicine tripod slowly. At this moment, Xiao Yang sat around waiting for Jiuyu, and his heart was immediately moved by it. In a pair of turbid old eyes, the pupils suddenly shrunk, and the expression on an old face also changed in horror. At this moment, it seemed that the world was quiet. He didn't expect that Xiao Yang in front of his eyes really did it. It's unbelievable that you can do 10 things with one heart and succeed in the end. This guy, Ju, actually did it. Jiuyu's lips and teeth trembled slightly, and his mouth was very dry and slowly spit out a sentence. When he spoke, the horror in his tone was even more indescribable. At the moment of smelling the strange fragrance, Guyo knew that Xiao Yang was not far from the last step of coagulating pill. I believe Xiao Yang can successfully refine a second-order pill in 2 days at most. Of course, Guyo won't be surprised that Xiao Yang can refine the second-order pill. What's shocking is that at the same time, Xiao Yang also controls the 9 incarnations and practices crazy together. It's the most difficult to do this step. Of course, there are many people who can refine second-order pills, but if the heart is divided into 10 uses, I'm afraid it's looking at the whole Yuanwu continent, and few people dare to try it. His eyes slowly fell into the medicine tripod at the moment. A rugged pill was spinning in the different fire. With the refining of the different fire, the power of the pill spread was gradually recovered and absorbed, and the glittering luster was revealing bit by bit from it, like a newborn bud and a fallen fruit. In the red medicine tripod, the process of coagulating pills lasted a whole day, which was half shorter than what Jiyu expected. Until the end, the strong smell of Dan incense spilled out from the medicine tripod like a thick fog. The bones were quiet and could not help wrinkling their eyebrows. If the Dan incense was allowed to overflow, it would attract some dog-nosed guys. This is not a good thing for Xiao Yan here. With a slight smile, Jiyu's big hand brushed. An invisible force quickly condensed an invisible energy barrier within 10 feet of Xiao Yang's body. Under this barrier, the qi of Danxiang could not have the opportunity to disperse. However, even if the overflowing of Dan fragrance was controlled, then, while the Dan medicine in Xiao Yang medicine tripod was taking shape, the original 9 sunny days suddenly changed color at this moment. In the twinkling of an eye, the original clear sky turned into thunder and fog, and the sound of thunder was heard all the time. In just a few breaths, the dark thunder cloud had occupied the void above Xiao Yang's head. However, the thunder cloud still had the trend of continuing to spread. Seeing this scene, Jiyu's face, which had just recovered, frowned again. The ordinary second-order pill can't cause such a big thunder cloud unless... Thinking of some possibility, Jiyu's eyes suddenly coagulated. While shocked, a pair of sharp eyes also instantly looked at the medicine tripod in front of Xiao Yang. To be exact, it was the second-order pill just refined in the medicine tripod at the moment. Can't you say? This boy is too terrible. Boom. The skin in the corner of his eyes twitched violently. Jiyu's eyes looked at Xiao Yang like a freak. When the low whisper in his mouth just fell, the dark thunder cloud began to become restless at the moment. Who? A long breath held in his chest. Xiao Yang, who has not breathed a sigh of relief for half a month, finally showed a smile like the rest of his life on his pale face. Oh, finally let me refine successfully. With a slight sigh in his mouth, Xiao Yang slowly raised his eyes. His body sitting on the top of the mountain did not move. His eyes stared at the 9 days. At the moment, the thunder cloud was rolling violently. Hehe, Dan Lei, if you have the ability, come on. There was a faint radiance in the corner of his mouth. Xiao Yang was not nervous about this Dan Lei, but with a sneer. It seemed that this was enough to make most pharmacists pale at the smell. For him, it was like a false existence. It seemed to be aware of the sneer in Xiao Yang's heart. The thunder cloud that had been violently churning was even more frightening in the next moment. Then, in the middle of the dark thunder cloud, a huge crack seemed to be torn open and gradually appeared. Immediately, boom! A terrible thunder fell from the thunderclouds above the 9 days, and the target was Xiao Yang below and the pill in the medicine tripod in front of him. Ha ha, if you are the emperor, I am really not an opponent, but since it is Dan Lei. Ha ha, Xiao Yang sat motionless and seemed to be waiting for the arrival of Dan Lei. At the same time, provoked by Xiao Yang's language, the power of Dan Lei soared exponentially at this moment. Wherever he passed, the invisible void collapsed in an instant. In front of him, even this world would tremble. However, even so, Xiao Yang sneered in exchange for this single thunder. The next moment, when the Dan thunder was about to fall, Xiao Yang waved his big hand, the light on the ring suddenly flashed between his fingers, and a black light burst out like lightning. The red void around him immediately followed the next moment, then he blasted with the oncoming Dan Lei. Boom! At the same time, the people in Shilin City were once again attracted by the thunder cloud in the sky outside the city. When they saw the thunder cloud again half a month later, they could not help thinking of the scene half a month ago. However, at the moment, compared with the thunder cloud half a month ago, the thunder cloud is obviously closer to them. Moreover, as everyone knows, the thunder cloud must be Dan Lei. There is no doubt that since it is Dan Lei, these semi-imperial strongmen in the city will inevitably be curious and greedy. Suddenly, streamers of light jumped up from the city, one after another came flying towards where Xiao Yang was at the moment. After the roar, the black streamer was fiercely blasted away by the giant thunder. At the same time, the Dan thunder was also forcibly blocked back. The black light fell and turned into the body of the North King. At the moment, in front of the North King's chest, the power of terror pounded a huge pit. It looked terrible. It was hard to imagine how terrible it would be if the thunder just landed on the living people. However, even so, when Xiao Yan looked, the huge pit in front of the North King's chest was also recovering rapidly with the naked eye. In the twinkling of an eye, the North King had completely recovered. Moreover, after the bombardment of Danlei, the North King was not hurt at all. On the contrary, his black skin became more profound. The thunder of thumb thickness flows continuously on Beiwang's body surface. Look carefully, a little purple and gold streamer quietly appears on Beiwang's body surface. Huh! Aware of this, Xiao Yang's eyes could not help but coagulate slightly. Immediately after that, a sense of surprise quickly rose from the bottom of his heart. This situation, Xiao Yang had seen on those golden demon puppets at the beginning. When the color of the puppets changed, it also proved that the puppet's strength was about to enter the next level. In front of him, this change happened to the North King. It also indicates that the strength of the Northern King is about to cross the half-emperor and enter the level of fighting the emperor and the strong. And this, for today's Xiao Yang, can be said to be a real amazing joy. Now the ancient ruins are about to open, and all the strong people gather in Shilin City. Not to mention the strong people at the semi-emperor level, there are no less than 10 strong people in terms of fighting the emperor. At the moment, this change of the North King is a big trouble in Xiao Yang's heart. If the North King breaks the fighting emperor suddenly, he can have a greater grasp of this trip to the ancient ruins. This video will end here.